All right. Again, we've got just a ton of follow-ups. That is the news this week. Unless you wanted to count the other depressing stories, like maybe not depressing, but the not good news of Anthem shutting down finally, which I actually didn't realize it was still up, but that's still not, it's not great for game preservation that any game ever goes offline for any reason. So do we want to talk about that? Not really. Do we have anything good to talk about? Not really. But it is important to kind of follow up on everything from last week. I was reading a lot of comments on the show from last week, and everybody is understandably upset. Some people, there's not really a lot of silver linings in the cloud from last week. So let's start here with this follow up first with Perfect Dark, AKA the thing that hurt me the most last week. Actually, before I do that, Michael, we didn't get a chance to have you on the podcast last week. Was there anything in particular that had kind of jumped out at you? Because we had kind of, well, at least I had latched on to Perfect Dark in particular being the thing that stung the most. And also I said was the most embarrassing thing for Microsoft out of all this. But were there any kind of top level thoughts that you wanted to crowbar in here before we just get into all these follow-ups?
Yeah. I mean, it'll make more sense once we kind of go through everything here. But the more I learned about Perfect Dark, like after the fact from various sources across the industry, the more and more it kind of unfortunately made sense that this didn't work out. So in the end, I kind of wasn't surprised. I was surprised that it had fell on its face this poorly, I guess. But various sources have told me that project had been mismanaged in so many different ways that it just didn't work out. The initiative being supposed to be like this spearheading a new development team for Xbox Game Studios didn't work out. In the end, I wasn't too surprised. But I guess top level, the thing that hurts the most is that 9,100 people are out of jobs.
Yeah,
because of mismanagement and expectations that are unrealistic. I mean, I talked about it 2 weeks ago before all this happened, as we had anticipated this. But at that time we were kind of like, oh, well, how is it going to be like strategic layoffs? Like you never want to see layoffs, period. But is this going to be something that is going to minimize the impact? And the answer was no. The impact was felt across the board, at least on the development side of things. And a lot of projects got canceled along the way. And I think that's the thing that hurts the most is that as successful as Xbox has been in recent years, it took a while to get there, but it felt like there was a lot of momentum. That momentum in the end kind of didn't matter. Maybe things could have been a lot worse if they hadn't had this momentum in the past couple years, or the success of last year going into this year, But the thing that probably stings the most is the fact that it doesn't matter how successful you are, you're going to get hit, and there's going to be, someone's going to suffer the consequences of mismanagement from the top. So,
yeah, well said. I mean, and that's and I think you're certainly with the benefit of hindsight here, we can see sure that you're absolutely right about the mismanagement at the initiative, and that starts at the top. That was Daryl Gallagher's studio guy, longtime Crystal Dynamics veteran from the Tomb Raider series. He was brought over to start this thing for Microsoft. And, I've never met Daryl Gallagher. I don't know Daryl Gallagher. So I've got, there's nothing personal about it. But yeah, I mean, you gotta run it back to him when at the end of the day, 7 years go by. You're not making a ton of progress. You've had a ton of turnover from your leads, like not just your. And I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but for lack of a better term, the rank and file development team, but also your team leads as well. Like that, a lot of people leave, and eventually Crystal Dynamics comes in. Was it a coincidence that Daryl was at Crystal Dynamics and that's who got brought in? I don't know. Who knows? There's probably a Jason Schreier or Rebecca Valentine report of all this waiting to come out at some point. But kind of on the subject of following up on Perfect Dark, there has been at least one public comment here from a former developer who worked on it, and they've addressed the claim that gameplay demo that we're seeing now here, and that I had said was my favorite demo of the showcase, of the fantastic showcase last year. People were saying, oh, it was fake, it wasn't real, and this developer has said, well, it was a glimpse. It was mostly real. So Kotaku writer Ethan, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Gach?
Ethan Gatch.
Gatch, thank you. I wasn't quite sure if it was like a German thing or... Anyway, Ethan posted on social that he'd been told that the demo was, quote, basically fake. And so a former Perfect Dark developer, Adam McDonald, who is now over at Studio MDHR as a senior game designer with the Cuphead team, responded publicly saying, quote, "It is actually in engine. I was one of 3 level designers that worked on it. It worked best if you played it the way the person playing it in the video plays it, but it still worked even if you didn't hit the marks perfectly." Said there's some fake stuff in it, he continued, and the real gameplay system shown off, worked just enough to look good in this video. We were rapidly making real design decisions so as not to knowingly lie to players about what the game will be. The parkour is all real. The hacking/deception is mostly real. The combat is real in that someone had to really do all that stuff in the video, but it's set up to be played exactly that way and didn't play well if you played it a different way. Miranda, does that remind you of any other infamous demo from Xbox past that we've sort of since learned the behind the scenes of?
Yeah, you had a great note about the Halo 2 E3 2003 demo. It's like you have to play, and I think like we talk a lot too about preview builds and other shown builds about being vertical slices and being very specific. So this honestly isn't the most surprising thing if they're trying to show off something, but there's a lot that's still in progress. And I don't necessarily think it's wrong so long as they were saying it's like not something they're lying that could potentially be done or something that they're committing to.
Yeah. And
we've definitely seen builds in the past and demos in the past where like they show one thing and it ends up looking completely different at launch. But that's the thing, right? It's like these are works in progress, so they are liable to change, and that's normal, except this one of course will not be changing because it no longer exists. But yeah, that definitely does happen.
Yeah, one of the more infamous vertical slices of all time was at least the one that jumps to my mind after the Halo 2 one was Aliens Colonial Marines. Anybody remember? I might be the only old to remember that one.
I think
but
so, yeah.
That one famously, the final game did not look like that, especially on console. It was a disaster on the 360 and the PS3. Anyway, Michael, for Perfect Dark here, your thoughts on this developer's comments kind of drawing the curtain back a little bit.
It's not too surprising. I mean, I can imagine there's a situation, considering that this game was more or less in development hell, you get to a point where it's like, hey, we want to show something off. So create a bespoke piece that is representative of the game, but isn't necessarily made for the actual gameplay experience yet. So it's like, oh fuck, we got to build a thing that kind of shows off what we have in place, some of the systems we have in place, and hopefully it doesn't break. Because I can imagine you being in a situation where like, hey, game development isn't linear. You don't develop like each piece of the game in a linear fashion as you go along.
Right.
All these things are built in tandem, and sometimes systems that are being built for a game don't line up with when levels are designed, or if there's like voice acting needs to be in place, or if there's like certain assets that need to be made. So you can get to a point where like you're still deep in development and you don't really have a vertical slice to show, so you need to create one. So I can imagine being in a place where, hey, we need to create something that looks like it's going to be the gameplay experience. So, when you come out and say it's fake, what does fake mean? And it's going to mean something different to everybody. So, this doesn't pop out of thin air. They don't just create something out of nothing. Is it really part of the game? That's contentious. But it's kind of a moot point at this point now, right? If this game was still in development, maybe it'd be a bigger point of discussion, like, oh, what is this game actually going to be? Well, the answer to that is nothing, unfortunately. And it's disappointing to hear on one end, because some people come out and say they weren't impressed by the demo. I kind of was, because I can look at this and extrapolate ideas of what they were going for in terms of, it's got a little bit of Dying Light in it. It's got a little Deus Ex in it. It's got the vibe of I would expect from a Perfect Dark. So I'm like, oh, I think they're on the right track with their ideas based on this gameplay slice that they showed. So I'm disappointed that I won't be able to play it. One, whatever they were cooking up, but two, I'm disappointed that an entire studio is now gone, because like the initiative, not only has this been canceled, but the entire team at the initiative has been laid off as well. So there's no recouping what happened. There's no picking up the pieces and seeing if they can make something out of it. Nah, that team is gone. And again, we could say like there was mismanagement. There's expectations for this game to be something that it was never going to be. Development cycles are chaotic and they can get drawn out, and they could have been expecting this in 2027 and they could just be like, hey, that's not realistic at all. And then so at a certain point they look at it and say they're going to cut their ties and cut their losses more or less. And unfortunately this is the result of that. And I don't know, it's again, not to repeat myself, but again, mismanagement of a project, not aligning expectations with the realities of game development and the team that you create. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. And when it doesn't work out at this scale, then you have something pretty devastating across the board.
I'm glad you brought up mismanagement, because when I think about it, like, Miranda, would you agree that if you were to boil Xbox's first party problems, specifically game problems, over the last 2 generations now, Xbox One and this one, doesn't it kind of boil down to mismanagement? Like, whether it was having Lionhead turn Fable into a stupid 4v1 game that nobody wanted, which resulted in the studio getting shut down because when they realized that, oh, no one wants a 4v1 Fable game, but oh, now we're staffed by people that make 4v1 games, so I guess we just have to kill this whole thing because the team in place doesn't have the sort of they're not equipped to make a proper Fable game. Like, it just seems like time and again over the last 2 generations, mismanagement is kind of one of the first things you can point to with Xbox.
Yeah, and I mean, even more recent looks, you can just kind of look at Halo, like what happened there. Like, there's just so many things that don't really make sense on the decision-making point. And it is really such a bummer. I was thinking, too, a little bit earlier about how we're like, for certain developers, we're like, oh, let them cook. If they need more time, it's fine. But there's a lot of reports, of course, coming out the cost of having more time. And while some developers do have enough funding to just do whatever they want, and I'm mostly just thinking about Rockstar and how they do with GTA or Red Dead, they obviously have a lot of money. They're still making money from GTA. They're still making money from Red Dead. But when you have a lot of other developers that don't have that cash flow to kind of subsidize like their ongoing development changes, then every time you change direction or add more or change things, it costs the team. And so I think just looking at the mismanagement of these things is just so disappointing that there's just not a consistent vision. And I was reading a really great piece by Matt Kim on our site today about Nintendo's recent investor call about how they're kind of looking to make sure that their development times stay consistent, and also looking at maybe shorter games or shorter experiences. Yeah. Obviously, some games just do take time. They do take investment and resources to make as big as they want them to be. But at the same time, if you keep changing your vision, and as you guys were saying, like with the case of Perfect Dark, it sounds like it was just sort of all over the place and like what they wanted to do as far as the execution, that that's going to cost everybody in the long run, and it obviously has. So it's just really disappointing to see that, as you said, Ryan, is very poignant, continues to plague a lot of the teams with Xbox. I don't know. I still look back at Halo and I'm just like, you guys had like this golden opportunity. It was, you're trying Halo multiplayer, free to play, you're doing all of these things that seem to indicate you're going in a really cool and different way. Like, they wanted to do more updates for the campaign, and then it just didn't pan out. And it's so strange to see that happen. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it, but it's just such a bummer to see that like they didn't have that, as far as we know, and as we've seen, the plan to execute on it properly. And I think that's, it's kind of stressful to think about, but I can't imagine how stressful it would be actually working in those places, trying to you just do your job and be like, okay, but what are we doing next? Or how is this going? Or why isn't this happening? And, you can only do so much, but people at the top have to make the calls. So
I'm glad you brought up Halo, because that's probably the best. Yes, you're right. That is the best example, because I think it's fair to say that when Xbox assumed full control of Halo from Bungie in 2010, I believe that was, if I recall correctly. I'd have to look it up to be sure, but it's about, so basically 15 years ago, okay, give or take a year. 15 years ago, Halo was, would either of you disagree that Halo was a top 5 franchise in all of gaming? Is that that's realistic, right?
At
top
that time,
5. I mean, it was
at that time. I don't think anyone would argue against that.
Now, there are other extra curricular reasons why Halo's not a top 5 franchise in gaming anymore. I mean, that the sort of coincided with the ultimate super rise of Call of Duty, with Call of Duty 4 specifically, that came out the same holiday season that Halo 3 came out. But yeah, Microsoft assumed control of a top 5 franchise in gaming, the thing that literally defined their entire brand, their entire platform. And now here we are in 2025, and I don't even think, is Halo a top 15 franchise in gaming?
If anyone says that they're a boomer, and I'm sorry.
I mean, whether it's GTA, it's Assassin's Creed, it's Elden Ring, we could just keep, obviously Mario, Zelda, you keep going and going and going. It's maybe top 20, at the bottom of the top 20, maybe. And it's, great point, Miranda, that Halo is a very expensive microcosm of what has the mismanagement that has plagued. I'll give you, I know I'm kind of drifting a little bit here, but I think I've told this story on the podcast before, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but just as a sort of small example of this, and this is, I don't think I'm speaking out of school here because it's been 10 years now. Halo 5, okay, Halo 5, very famously phenomenal multiplayer, but it's this multiplayer is awesome, but also very equally famously and just awful campaign, just not even close to the standard of other Halo campaigns, which was magnified by the marketing campaign that totally didn't match the actual game you played. So at E3 the next year, so that would have been 2016, because Halo 5 shipped in 2015. I'm walking out of the Xbox booth to go to another appointment somewhere at E3. And there's a group of 343 people there. And I know some of them, they know me, and they stop me and say hello. And we had done right when Halo 5 came out. Miranda, I don't know if you were on the podcast at this point.
I don't think I was. I don't remember if I guessed it on, but I remember working on the guide. I very fondly remember working on the guide for that and my little setup for it, but I don't think I was.
Okay, so I must have been Destin and probably Sean Finnegan, and I don't know if Mitch was still there at that point.
Yeah, Mitch was still there.
But so we had our podcast. People can go back and find it. We ripped Halo 5's campaign a new one. We did not hold back at because we love Halo so much, and that campaign was so disappointing. It was just not good. And so we put that out. And so at E3 the following year, the next time any of those developers saw me, they tracked me down on the show floor of E3. and said, "Hey, we really appreciated that podcast you did right after the game came out," and they told me that there were two factions within 343, and basically they said, "Well, yeah, we lost." Like, in other words,
sure, yeah,
not everyone wanted to make the campaign that ultimately ended up getting made, which, to your point, Miranda, just goes to show mismanagement, right? The wrong decision was made time and again. So yeah, I know we kind of ended up veering way off here, but Perfect Dark is just, as you said, Michael, it is the latest and most and terrible and costly, so many jobs, most costly mismanagement decision or result of mismanagement that has come down yet. So
yeah.
All right. The next follow-up from last week. And by the way, I if anybody just decides to skip this episode because you're like, I just want to hear about fun gaming news, I get it.
It's a heavy one.
I get it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, those people probably aren't hearing this because they've already tapped out or they never tapped in to begin with on this episode. That's fine. But, we've done this podcast every week for, well, more than the entire time I've been at IGN. So we're here for the good times and the bad. And these are the bad, unfortunately, now.
Quickly, I do want to say that, I like you said, I get it if you're not into like the bummer news, especially if you've already been keeping up with it. But I will also say that I think it's important, personally, I think it's important to understand how your favorite things get made.
Yeah.
And if you do love playing video games and if you are dedicated to playing on Xbox, whatever the case might be, these are realities that I would encourage people to understand and know if this is a hobby that they want to kind of embrace. So, I'll just at least say that.
What's happening in the world of the developers and the people that make your favorite things will impact what they make, right? So I think it's important to have the context and also to have that appreciation for the people who are making these things, like they don't come out of thin air. So I think it's good to have that context. I agree, Michael.
Well said, both of you. Absolutely. So one of the casualties last week in terms of projects was the new MMO from ZeniMax Online Studios, the developers of the Elder Scrolls Online. Thanks for checking out this clip from Unlocked, IGN's weekly Xbox show. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to watch the full episode at youtube.com/IGN Games. New episodes of Unlocked drop every Thursday on IGN Games, IGN.com, and your favorite podcast platforms. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.